best of, worst of, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and keep it separate. This is the worst of 2012, my list of the worst movies that have come out in that year. And I know this is going to be probably reaching you guys a little late, but you know what, hey, when you have time. So, I'm going to go ahead and get right to it because, hell, we all know what this is. These are the absolute shit movies that I saw. Now, I want to go ahead and, once again, like I did for the best of, I did something similar here. I tried to keep I tried to keep a different list for movies that I felt didn't belong with the worst of it. Anything that I felt was not a wide release, and by that I mean something that was not released in a shit ton of theaters. Something that was like, I'm not really going to add anything that was direct to DVD or, only on video on demand. I'm only going to go with films that actually got theatrical releases. And I also have another list that I'm going to kind of throw in, which is kind of my honorable mentions, but a little bit different. First we'll get the worst of, and then what we're going to do is something I have called the movies that were meh in 2012, which basically movies that I didn't think were bad, but I didn't think were great. These were movies that were hyped up too much and did not live up to anywhere near the expectations that I felt they should have lived up to. But let's go ahead and get the worst of out of the way. And let's start it with a little bit of patriotism. I want to talk about my number 10 movie, and it is Act of Fucking Valor. I'm sorry, you can call me unpatriotic, you can call me a terrorist, you can say that I'm in league with Osama bin Laden, I really don't give a shit. This movie fucking sucked. And I'm sorry, I know that they tried to say that, we decided to use real military personnel because we wanted to show what it's really like. No, you should have gotten some real actors and some people in this movie who can actually sell this shit. This movie is fucking boring. It felt like an army commercial. The only thing that was fucking missing was the Godsmack music and Keith David's voice. Fucking sucked. The number 9 movie on my list, which is Underworld Awakening. Oh, man. And I remember going to go see this movie, and when it was all said and done, I looked at the person next to me, who I want to say was my girlfriend, and we both looked at each other and was like, man, I don't know what to make of this movie. Oh, my God. What happened? And it's just like, I wrestled with it for weeks. What do I think of this movie? I don't know if I like it, if I hate it, if it just, it left me, you know what it felt like? It felt like that moment when, and men, women, you probably know this feeling, I don't know, maybe this might show a side of me that you probably don't want to know about, but it feels like that moment when you just had sex with somebody that you didn't really want to have sex with because you weren't attracted to them, but the shit just happened. And you sit there and you lay there and you're just like, I don't really want to look at this person. This is kind of awkward now. How about we just never speak to each other again? And when you see them on the street, you kind of avoid each other and don't make eye contact. That's kind of how I felt about this movie. I mean, it felt like such an unnecessary film. Like, just everything about it was just bad. Kate Beckinsale was the only thing. I mean, she tried her hardest to make this movie work, and she was the only one and only good thing about it, but the rest of the movie was just shit. My next one is Snow White and the Huntsman at number 8. This movie, I don't really know what else to say about it. I mean, I went in this movie knowing that I probably wasn't going to like it. It has Kristen Stewart in it, for Christ's sakes. Charlize Theron, who I usually can depend on for good acting in a movie that is otherwise filled with non-actors, people who just really suck at the job. And the only shiny spot in this movie was Chris Hemsworth, who was basically playing Thor, only instead of having a hammer, he had an axe. And that was it. He was playing the same guy. And Kristen Stewart, oddly enough, was not the worst part of this movie, but she definitely wasn't great either. I mean, she showed slightly more range and emotion than what she does in the Twilight movies and every other thing I've seen her in. Charlize Theron, absolutely abominable. Absolutely abominable. I mean, the dialogue in this movie seems like it was recycled from Mortal Kombat and the worst parts of Star Wars. And that's just not a good thing to aspire to. Next up on my list is number 7, Gone, which is a movie starring Amanda Seyfried that did release in theaters, probably not as many as most people would think, but probably way more than what it should have been. This movie should have been direct-to-DVD, it was absolute shit, and showcased some of the worst acting I have ever seen. And God bless Amanda Seyfried. She tries so hard, and every time she picks dud after dud after dud after dud. I don't know what to do with this girl. It's either Jennifer's Body or that, I want to say it was her that was in that shitty Single White Female remake. What was it? Red Riding Hood. The girl just picks poor movies, and I've seen her in other things. I know she's a good actress, but this woman is not picking her roles properly, and this movie is a pure testament to it. Gone? Yeah, no. This movie should have been called fuck Gone. It should have just been called Never Made, because this movie just fucking sucks. The movie couldn't figure out what it wanted to be. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be a smart thriller, if it wanted to be one of those kind of M. Night Shyamalan, ooh, we're going to catch you with a twist at the end. The movie just was a train wreck. And this leads me to the number 6 movie, which I also felt was equally as shitty. And this one is Jessica Biel in The Tall Man. And this movie, I'm sorry, Jessica Biel is one of those actresses. I love her. I think she's amazing. I really think she gets the short end of the stick when it comes to how people consider who is the actress? Who is the actress out there that really has it? And I remember Jessica Biel was that it girl for a little while, but lately Jessica Biel has been the shit girl. Because I'm sorry, I love to see her get work, but not like this. Not like this, Jessica Biel. I'm sorry, I cannot go with you on this one. This movie was just absolute dog shit. Now, let's move on to my number 5, which may be controversial to some and maybe not surprising to others. Number 5 is The Hunger Games. So, let's talk about this. Let's throw out the Battle Royale comparisons. Let's throw out the fact that this movie was based on a book that was written by somebody who claims they never had even heard of Battle Royale until people started comparing the two properties. Let's throw that out the window. First off, nothing was happening in the movie. I have never read the books, but just looking at certain scenes that occurred in the movie, I could tell that there were just things, glaring plot points that were just left out. Things that it just felt like things were left unsaid. And for the most part, I like Jennifer Lawrence as an actress. She's in one of my other favorite movies of the year that I didn't really put on my list because I really didn't see it until it was way too late, and I just didn't really feel like going back and changing anything. But I really felt like she pulled a Kristen Stewart on me in this movie. And she is an amazing actress, but maybe in an attempt to get that Twilight money, maybe the director said, hey, look, I want you to dumb it down a little bit. I want you to give those stupid, awkward looks that Kristen Stewart gives because that really draws the female audience in. I honestly felt like that's what happened. And the movie suffered for it. There was nothing going on. The character development was absolutely shit. And they put too much focus on some scenes that I felt had no purpose. And for a movie called The Hunger Games, I saw motherfuckers eating left and right. And for them to be, they got training before they went to the movie, but all I saw people do were throw balls, hit buttons, and do stupid shit. I'm sorry, I cannot forgive the movie for that. Sorry, fucking sucked. Next movie, number 4, is Rock of Ages. And I'm sorry, this was the worst and longest Glee episode I have ever seen. Now anyone who knows me well knows I'm not the hugest fan of musicals, and what few musicals I do like are either genre musicals, like Sweeney Todd or Rocky Horror Picture Show, or have some kind of gimmick to it, like, say, Across the Universe, where it's all Beatles music, so it's music I'm familiar with. And yeah, that may be the case, but Rock of Ages had everything going for it. It's music that's from my childhood that I love. It has actors in it that I fucking admire, like Tom Cruise and Alec Baldwin and Paul Giamatti. And somehow this film managed to suck shit through a straw at every fucking turn. And it was awful. It was awful. And now, listening to some of the songs that are in this movie, it makes me cringe. And no movie has ever achieved that effect. No movie has made me hate the things that came before it. And somehow Rock of Ages pulled that shit off. It was basically like watching a 2-hour Glee episode. And to some people that might be a good thing, but to me that is just way too much. Number three for me is Dark Shadows. Yeah. Dark Shadows was kind of self-explanatory. I went in this movie knowing, alright, look, this is pure camp. This is going to be, it's basically going to reek of the type of camp you would only find in a movie the likes of Batman and Robin by Joel Schumacher. I mean, it just had it written all over its sleeve. And, I mean, I'm not the hugest fan of the original property of Dark Shadows, but the original Dark Shadows was anything but camp. And I felt like Tim Burton really just kind of took the easy out and trying to make this some kind of camp vanity project. I don't know what the fuck it was. Either way, the movie just absolutely reeked. The only good thing I can say about this movie is Eva Green was kind of hot, and she made a convincing villain, but for the most part, everything in this movie was fucking dumb. The acting was fucking wretched. The directing, Tim Burton literally was not even fucking trying on this movie. And I know a lot of people have a hard-on for Tim Burton and think, oh, well, Tim Burton's an auteur. He's a genius. He can do no wrong. But let's go ahead and point this out right now. A, your favorite movies by him probably weren't really directed by him. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, Nightmare Before Christmas. And I'm sorry, but, I mean, yeah, but a lot of people like to go back to, oh, well, he directed, Batman and Batman Returns, which were good movies, but in retrospect, as, being older, they don't really hold up very well, considering the fact that Tim Burton really didn't give a shit about the Batman property, and he was really just doing this for a check. I mean, yeah, you can give Edward Scissorhands a nod, but, yeah, we're still grasping at straws here. Let's talk about the number 2 movie, because I'm literally kind of just irritated with the fact we've been talking about Dark Shadows. These next 2 movies I'm going to actually spend a little bit more time talking about, just because of the fact that they were so wretched. They were so abominable. Honestly, number 1 and number 2, heck, even number 3 for that matter. All of these movies could honestly have taken the same spot at any given time on this list, as far as the 1, 2, and 3 slot go. They're honestly equally as bad. And Dark Shadows was awful, but these 2 really took the cake. And so let's just go ahead and get to it. Number 2 on this list, Mirror, Mirror. Absolutely horrible. Look, this movie, once again, like Dark Shadows, they were trying to go for the camp. And they did do it, but they did not do it well. This movie, just everybody was hamming it up. It just... Is it not a sad thing for me to say that you have Sean Bean in your movie? You have fucking Game of Thrones in your movie. This man is acting his ass off, and the only good thing I can say about this film is that it's the one movie, the one thing you'll see Sean Bean in this year, or any other year for that matter, where he doesn't die. That's the one good thing I can say about that movie. The one good thing. it just, I don't know. I've never really been much of a Tarsem Singh guy. I really have not seen any other movies by the man. But this movie was written, directed, scripted, whatever you want to call it. Everything. It just poorly. Really piss poor. Julia Roberts, who is, to her credit, an amazing actress and very tenured and deserves the respect and awards and accolades that she has garnered over the years, but she was one of the worst parts of this movie. I mean, she just was not good. Not good at all. I mean, it was embarrassing. This movie was literally, like, for anyone who was in this movie, whether it's Julia Roberts, Armie Hammer, whoever, you should not put this on your resume. Like, you ever, like, have that job application that you're filling out, and there's that part where it says work history, and you always know there's that one job or two that you took that you're either A, not proud of, or B, you got fired from or did some dumbass shit that you don't want your next employer to find out about. This is that movie. This is the movie you leave off your resume. This is the movie when you go to your own personal IMDb page, you talk to the webmaster and say, hey, look, man, can you please just take that off my credit? Because I don't really want anyone to know that I was a part of this piece of shit. And that being said, let's move on from Mirror Mirror. The next one on this list is I don't know, probably one of the worst movies I've seen in a decade. This movie, Ghost Rider, The Spirit of Vengeance, the movie that was supposed to bring Ghost Rider back to form. The movie that was supposed to reignite and fix all those problems that fanboys had with the original Ghost Rider movie, also starring Nicolas Cage, which is the main problem. So what was their answer to fixing the problems with the original Ghost Rider? The fact that it had just a subpar cast of characters. The fact that Johnny Blaze, played by Nicolas Cage, was not the same Johnny Blaze we knew from the comics, who was not the darker, edgier character. What was their answer to fixing this? And the fact that he had a very, very just ridiculously played out love interest in Eva Mendes. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to fix the problem? What do we do? Well, let's bring back Nicolas Cage, because, I mean, obviously the guy's a huge fan of Ghost Rider. He has Ghost Rider tattooed on his arm, for Christ's sakes. He's got to be the right guy. Wrong. What do? We bring in, let's bring in some seasoned actors. Let's bring in some seasoned talent to help. We're going to bring in Idris Elba, who's an amazing actor. But also, we're going to direct him to act shittily, because I will say this. I love Idris Elba, but god damn, brother, you did, once again, what I said about Mirror Mirror, Idris Elba, you might want to think about this one. Leave this off your resume. What else are we going to do here? We're going to bring in a villain that no one knows unless they are just really hardcore, diehard fans of the comic book, and we're also going to mix him up and change him around a little bit. So basically, he's still not the same guy that you may or may not remember. Okay. We're going to give you slightly, maybe 5 seconds more screen time of Ghost Rider than what was in the original film, and yeah, that's about it. Did you guys ever see the trailer for Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance where Nicolas Cage is talking to a kid and he says, I think he says something to the effect of, so does it burn when you pee? And it cuts to a shot of Ghost Rider pissing all over, like was back to the screen, but he's just pissing fire everywhere. That's what this movie did the whole time. I mean, it just was, this movie just, they came in and just pissed all over the audience. They pissed all over the script, whatever, if you can call it a script. The movie fucking sucked. The whole time, I couldn't figure out if the things that were in this movie that were funny were intentional or not. And there were certain points where I really did feel like this was not intentional. These guys really thought they were making a A-list movie, and that this was the movie that Marvel would be proud to sign off on, and I'm sorry, it just did not happen. Was Ghost Rider better looking in this movie? Did he look better in this movie than he did in the original one where he looked like shit? Yeah, he looked better, I can say that. Did he do anything more than what he did in the original movie? Yeah, a little bit. Still, this movie is the epitome of what I mean when I say a movie sucks shit through a straw. This movie is just... just nobody cared about this movie. Nobody cared. Nobody involved cared. And if it says anything, Christopher Lambert, who I don't think I've seen a movie in years, especially one that wasn't direct to video, is in this movie. And I honestly think that he was in this movie because Thomas Jane was busy. They were like, look, man, can we get Thomas Jane? Oh, wait, he's busy with his show on HBO? Fuck it. Call Christopher Lambert. They look alike. And that's kind of how I felt about this. This movie fucking sucked and is the worst possible thing I've seen all year. And let's get away from the worst of. I actually kind of wanted to cut down on how much I talked about the worst of because I really wanted to talk a little bit more about the movies that I felt were meh in 2012. And the reason for this is because I felt like 2012 was a really strong year for good movies. I also felt that it had quite a few bad movies, but the one thing that really stood out about 2012 is that we had just as many movies that were disappointing as we did have movies that were actually genuinely good. And I want to go ahead and kick this off. Like I said, we're going to do a top 10. These are the movies, and once again, let me preface this by saying that I don't want people, getting mad because I put a movie you really loved on this list. These are movies that I felt like... I'm not saying these are bad films. I'm not saying they're terrible. Not every movie... I mean, yeah, there's a few of them on here I think are shit. But really, these are movies that I did enjoy, I had fun with, but they just didn't deliver like they should have delivered. Let's start with number 10. Number 10 on my list is Total Recall, the 2012 remake of Total Recall starring Colin Farrell, Jessica Biel, and God, why am I blanking on her name all of a sudden? Kate Beckinsale. Even has Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad and all that good stuff in it. Total Recall was one of those movies that when I sat down and watched it, I didn't just... What's the best way to put it? I didn't not enjoy this film. I actually really had a lot of fun with it. But I remember when I saw the trailer for it originally, I was like, dude, this could be really awesome. And I was like, all right, cool. They're kind of going for a different type of reality with this one, where it's not set on Mars. It's... they're going for something a little bit different. This could be really good. This could be a nice touch. I like Colin Farrell as an actor. He was kind of starting to come back up, into the public eye after Horrible Bosses and stuff like that. And it was good to see him getting work again and him being that guy again. I'm like, he's a good actor. He can carry a movie. I was glad to see Jessica Biel back in a movie that didn't suck. And it was also really nice to see Kate Beckinsale doing something other than being the vampire chick. I really liked what I saw here in this movie. It was very good, but like I said, there were a few parts in it like where the movie couldn't really decide what it wanted to be. The movie couldn't decide whether it wanted to be a reboot or a remake, and it kind of played to the film's detriment. I will say, the strongest part of this movie is actually Kate Beckinsale, which I'll get into a little bit more in a later section, but I will say this. She really helped push this movie a little bit farther. Like, she kept the movie interesting to me, because I was like, man, this woman she's not the main bad guy of this film. Bryan Cranston is the main bad guy of this film, and she overshadows him. And I thought that, man, that's kind of weird, but like, it kind of took me back to the 80s, where when you watch a lot of those old 80s flicks, those old 80s action movies, it was always the right-hand man who seemed to be the bigger badass than the guy who was the actual villain of the film. I don't know if you guys ever remember any of the films that were like that, but I always think back to movies like like Die Hard, where you had Hans Gruber, who was a badass. Let's not discredit Alan Rickman in that role, but I forget his name, but the blonde-haired dude who came back at the very end of the movie. Sorry, spoiled it for you in case you've never seen Die Hard, but that's your own damn fault. But he was kind of a bigger badass than Hans Gruber. It was kind of like that. She was that guy. Like, she kept coming back, and I really liked that about the movie. But ultimately, it was one of those movies that where I went into the movie thinking, oh man, this is going to be really awesome. I kind of walked out of it like, it was fun. I had a good time with it. I mean, I did really enjoy it, but I mean, it wasn't. I kind of felt like the movie was like, had they not made this movie, I would not have been the guy to go, man, they really need to remake Total Recall. You know, that's not something I feel, because I honestly think that Total Recall could have stood on its own, and without a need to remake. And in saying that, what I'm really trying to say is that I feel like you should not have to remake movies that were good. You should try and remake movies that were bad. Or you fuck something up royally in this movie. Let's redo that. Kind of like what they did with the Hulk. There you go. The next movie on my list at number 9 is The Collection. Anyone who has spoken to me at length about me and my favorite horror movies, you'll automatically know that one of the first movies that's going to come up on the list is going to be The Collector, which was an amazing film. Amazing. And it did something a little different. Like, it took you and put you into the shoes of a character by the name of Arkin, who was a guy who did security setups on people's homes, and when they would leave, he would come back knowing exactly how their security works and what they have of value in their home. He would break into their homes and then take what was of value. Well, this time, he goes into a house, breaks in, and it turns out that somebody else had the same idea he had, but instead of going after the valuables, he's going after the people. And he sets all these elaborate traps up to catch people and kill people, and basically break them down until the last person. Well, The Collection is a sequel to that, and while I enjoyed parts of The Collection, on the whole, I ultimately walked out of the movie going, it was alright. You know, I mean, I had problems with the movie. I really did. I had a lot of problems with the movie. The more I thought about it after walking out of the theater, the more I realized I have issues with this movie. This movie was not quite as good as I was hoping it would be. Now, I will say this. As far as horror movie setups go, one of the things I really did like about that this movie did versus what others do, it kind of took me back to the mid to late 90s when the Scream movies came out, because during that time frame in slasher films, and The Collection and The Collector are technically slasher films, you were always used to the bad guy getting hurt or you know, getting shot, blown up, electrocuted, and it doesn't faze him. He just keeps coming because he's an unstoppable force of nature, like Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger or Michael Myers. And you would watch these movies and be like, man, you really can't do anything to these guys. You kind of just have to get the fuck out of their way. In The Collection, it's a little bit different because it takes you back to those Scream days where I remember in Scream 2, I watched Sarah Michelle Gellar throw a love seat at the Ghostface killer, and it hit him and knocked him the fuck out, and he was like all woozy and shit. And it kind of took me back to that, because in The Collection, they take the Aliens approach. These guys go in with a team. These guys go with a team of these, you know, I guess they're supposed to be like, they're not cops, they're not military, it's never really incredibly clear exactly who or what they are, but basically a team of badasses to go in here and like, look, we're gonna fuck this guy up, we're gonna go into the belly of the beast, we're gonna treat this guy's home like it's LV-426 from Aliens or some shit, and we're gonna go in there and fucking nuke the site from orbit. It's the only way to be sure. That's pretty much the attitude that these guys take with this movie, and the team is led by Lee Tergesen, who you guys may know from the from the series Oz. He's been in a lot of TV shows. Lee Tergesen is one of those guys that I'm surprised he is not a star of somebody's CSI. Because, I mean, he should be leading somebody's CSI at this point. I mean, the man's an amazing actor. He's very well acted. He knows how to work with good material. And I always love him in everything I see him in. And it really hurt my feelings that this movie, as hyped up as I was kind of going into it, I just walked out of it ultimately unfulfilled. I mean, there were great things in the movie. Like I said, also one of the only horror movies I've seen in quite some time where the villain, the slasher himself, gets his comeuppance. I mean, that's not even really spoiling anything, but I mean, he gets as good as he gives, and I really like that about the film. But ultimately, there were some plot holes that really stuck out, some loose ends from the first movie that I felt like they just kind of, completely overlooked or just forgot about. And it also got to a point where it was like, okay, wait a minute, this guy's shit is a little bit too elaborate. Now we're breaking into Saw territory, where now I'm starting to question, okay, well, wait a minute, how the fuck did he set all this up and nobody notices it until it's time to fall into the trap? Other than that, like I said, the movie is good. It just isn't, it's just not as good as its predecessor. Let's talk about my next movie on this list. Number 8 is Paranorman. Now, I did enjoy Paranorman for the most part, and I honestly felt like it dealt with a lot of subject matter that is very above what kids are probably used to seeing in their movies. And it had just enough there for adults. I mean, there were moments in the movie, especially in the very early parts, where I was like, man, this is kind of heavy stuff for a kid. And I like the take that they did with it. I liked Norman. I even liked his counterparts. I guess was the school bully, who oddly enough is voiced by Christopher Mintz-Plasse, which is kind of weird in and of itself. And you also have Anna Kendrick playing his older sister. His family is just really down on him, and because he sees ghosts and they don't believe him. They think the kid's crazy because he's talking to grandma all the time, and everybody's like, look, dude, Norman, you're just fucking crazy, until the shit hits the fan, and they're like, wait a minute, this motherfucker knows what he's talking about. The movie is good. The first and second acts are honestly the strongest part of the film. It's actually in the third act where they kind of stick the landing, and I feel like they kind of use some retreaded ground, and instead of doing something new or trying something different with the movie, they really took the easy out. But as far as movies go, I do want to go ahead and put this on Front Street. I don't think the movie is bad. Like, once again, it's just one of those movies that I felt like didn't really live up to the hype set before it. Let's move on to the next film. The next film at number 7 is Lockout. Now, Lockout it's kind of unfair for me to put it on this list because technically there was no real major hype surrounding this movie. It was just one of those movies I saw a trailer for and I was like, oh, Guy Pearce is in it. I really like Guy Pearce. And it looks really good. I like Maggie Grace for the most part in most of the things I've seen her in. But ultimately, I really felt like this movie was going to offer me something a little bit more than what was advertised. Because it kind of had that whole Escape from New York feel to it. Or Escape from LA, as the case may be. And it was bogged down by, and I'm not even saying this is Guy Pearce's fault, because I'm pretty sure this is how he was directed to play the character, but it was just bogged down in way too many one-liners. The chemistry between Guy Pearce and Maggie Grace's character just was not there. The twist ending was a little bit much and kind of came out of left field and just didn't feel natural, especially with the way that it was played up. But all things said, the action in the movie was very well done. I actually liked the way the villains were played up in this movie. I mean, they kind of had a dynamic because you really had two main villains, and they were both brothers. And one was the cool, calm, collected, hey, look, I have a plan. I'm methodical about this. I am basically the Ra's al Ghul of this prison facility. And then you had his dim-witted brother who was kind of like a retarded version of the Joker. It just, because you had cool, calm, collected, and hey, look, we're doing this by the book. We're not going to be the Savage's villain. But he's also counterbalanced by the, man, let's just watch the fucking world burn type of character. And I thought it was a good dynamic. They played it up very well. But ultimately, it was really Guy Pearce and Maggie Grace, which were kind of the weak points of this movie. But still, good movie. Just not as good as it should have been. Or could have been, rather. I won't say should have been. My movie at number 6... the movie at number 6 is The Man with the Iron Fist. I went into this movie and the movie kind of misrepresented itself, and I don't mean in the sense that like it made some point to make it look like the movie was going to be good, because I knew it wasn't going to be good. I actually kind of thought this was going to be my guilty pleasure movie of the year, and it ended up not being. It actually kind of ended up being one of those movies that honestly, after seeing it, I kind of forgot about it. Until it came time to do this list, and the movie, from the trailer, it almost makes it seem like Man with the Iron Fist is going to be a tournament film. Like, it's going to be this movie that is about some kind of tournament where all these badasses from different lands are going to have to fight each other. Wasn't really the case, and some of the characters that they played up to be good guys were actually villains. And some of the people they played up to be, the bad guys were actually the protagonists of the movie. And it just, I don't know, you can tell that this movie was directed by the RZA. You can tell this movie was directed by somebody who had never directed a film before. And I read a lot about what happened behind the scenes between RZA and Eli Roth. At one point, RZA wanted to put all these different crazy things in the movie. He wanted to make it a trilogy and tell this long, drawn-out story. Eli Roth was like, look, man, just tell this one story. It doesn't have to be a trilogy. Let's condense this all. Tell your story, get your money, get the fuck out. And RZA got pissed off, and they had a falling out, and he ended up leaving the production of the movie and came back later. And it was one of those movies when you look at it, you just know this movie is not going to be good. It's going to be pretty bad, in fact, but there'll be some things in it that'll make you laugh. And probably the one saving grace of this movie, and it was not Russell Crowe or Lucy Liu, or even the RZA, for that matter. The one saving grace in this movie was, I want to say that the name of the character was Silver Lion, who is played by Byron Mann, who, for the most part, most people, when you look at him, you'll probably remember him from one of two things. You'll either remember him as Ryu from that god-awful, shitty Street Fighter movie, the live-action one, or you'll remember him from something like Nikita, the TV show, or you'll maybe remember him from like that god-awful Catwoman movie, or just any various thing. I mean, he was even on Smallville for a while, too, as Commander Chang. He's one of those guys that you don't see in a lot of stuff. Or rather you do, but it's never anything that's going to, like, blow you away. And he was actually the only thing about this movie I liked, because he kind of had this whole humble persona at first when the movie starts, but then he kind of goes in this overlord, super power-hungry mode. And he even has some responses to things that people say to him in the movie that are, like, realistic to a degree that they don't belong in a movie. Like, there's a part where, he's talking to his subordinates, and he's like, we will take over the land. We will reap and pillage and destroy our foes. And we'll do this, and we'll do that. And he says, is everyone with me? And everybody's, for the most part, with him. This one guy's kind of like, I don't know about that. And he literally turns around and was like, really? What the fuck, really? It was one of those where I was like, wow, that was kind of cool. And he kind of had this whole Prince, like the artist, like as in the musician pop star Prince attitude going about. When you look at him, you almost kind of see that orange glow behind him and the smoky shit like in Purple Rain. But that's enough about that. I mean, like I said, Man with the Iron Fist, it had, aside from that, the acting and everything, and pacing issues and just the directorial faux pas. It just was not a good movie. Not even a bad one either. Just it was one of those middle of the road deals where like you may not remember it after you see it, and you probably for good reason. I mean, it's I know it's a throwback to those old Shaw Brothers movies, but those Shaw Brothers movies had one. They all had something going for them, and it was the fact that they weren't intentionally trying to be bad. Let's move on to my next one. My next movie on the list at number 5 is John Carter, which is one of the biggest, possibly the biggest box office bomb of our time. And I mean, honestly, this movie really had no excuse to suck. I mean, they had a lot of the proper pieces in place, and it for whatever reason, didn't work out. You had Willem Dafoe. You had Mark Strong playing generic bad guy number 674. Because that's what he does. He plays generic bad guys. I mean, the movie, it's supposed to be centered around what was the original superhero, the original sci-fi superhero. And honestly, what wound up happening was you just got a middle-of-the-road shit film. And it's just like there were parts where the movie really shined, but I honestly think that in light of the fact that you got Andrew Stanton, who is primarily known for his work with a lot of the Pixar films, like, I mean, the guy directed stuff the likes of Toy Story and Finding Nemo, WALL-E, and shit like that. And it's one of those that you kind of feel like this guy really didn't know what he was doing. He was so used to working with animated stuff that it kind of overwhelmed him. That's what I feel like happened in this movie, because I hear a lot of the movies just absolutely astronomical budget came from reshoots and having to redo stuff because shit wasn't shot right the first time. And it just a lot of these notes, I mean, yes, I know these all come from the actual John Carter book, but George Lucas raped and pillaged that entire body of work to put in his Star Wars movies. So a lot of the shit you see in this movie isn't really news. It's kind of like, you look, it's like, oh, yeah, the arena scene, yeah, that was in Attack of the Clones. And that's kind of what I felt like. I mean, and the movie kind of drags on its ending. It kind of pulls a Return of the King on its ending, which I didn't really appreciate, because I was like, man, this movie's just dragging on way too fucking long. But John Carter, it just, I don't know, it proves once again that movies about Mars, nobody really gives a shit about, because they historically have always done poorly in the box office. And not only that, but this movie just did not do well critically, and it just, I don't know, the movie, for all of its good intentions, it just failed to rise to the occasion. And it's really sad, because I think this movie, in conjunction with Battleship, which was a very shitty film, but I didn't put it on my top 10 worst stuff, because honestly, I didn't see it, because I knew it was shit. You don't need me to tell you this movie's shit. If you couldn't look at that trailer and tell that movie was shit, then you got bigger problems. But that just, he had the misfortune, Taylor Kitsch had the misfortune of coming out with 2 particularly shitty movies, all within the course of one summer, and it basically cemented him as being box office poison. I mean, you just look at this movie and you know, oh, wait, Taylor Kitsch is in that shit? Yeah, man, I'm going to go and skip that one. And that's pretty much what killed John Carter. The next movie on my list, at number 4, is Prometheus. Now, my problem with Prometheus, because I did enjoy it for the most part, but I couldn't figure out, I don't know, the movie, I don't know if it was Ridley Scott or the people that, behind the scenes as producers, but they couldn't figure out if they wanted this to be a prequel, a reboot, an alternate universe, or all of the above. Because Ridley Scott talked all this shit about, there'll be no aliens in the movie. Though they did technically have an alien in the movie. There's not going to be anything like the anything you've seen in the original Alien movies in this movie. And they had things exactly like stuff from the original Aliens trilogy or quadrilogy, or however you want to think about the series. I mean, you had a prototype facehugger. You had a prototype xenomorph. I don't know, just the whole movie just really could not get itself together. And there were things that were left unsaid. There were characters that seemed to really suck at their job as scientists. Charlize Theron just once again was in a movie where she just was not even trying. I keep thinking to myself, this woman was in Monster, for Christ's sake. This woman is an award-winning actress. Why is she sucking so hard in these movies? It just, I don't know, it had way too many problems that they just could not be ignored. So I'll just go ahead and say now that if, for all its good intentions and that Prometheus was a very entertaining movie to watch, I ultimately felt like for a movie that was supposed to answer questions that I had about the original series, I felt like it honestly just confused the shit out of me more than anything else. It's a sad thing because I really felt like they had a little something going there that they could have really worked off of. But enough about Prometheus. Let's move on to the number 3 film. The number 3 film is Brave. And I put Brave here because I was really excited to see this movie. I really wanted to see it. It looked like a really good premise. And the thing about the trailer that they kind of hide about the movie, which is my biggest issue with the film, is that the main character, Merida, is a brat. That's actually what the movie should have been called. It shouldn't have been called Brave. It should have been called Brat. Because in the trailer, they kind of give you this idea that, oh yeah, she doesn't want to get married because her parents are overbearing. They're trying to push her into this whole betrothal thing. And it's not fair to her, so, you know what, she wants to change her fate. That's kind of how the trailer plays this character up. But when you watch the movie, you realize that, okay, yeah, this is partially true. Her mother is overbearing. But at the same time, Merida is the biggest brat I've seen in a movie in quite some time. I mean, she is literally the whiniest bitch I have ever seen. And there were times where, honestly, I kept groaning and huffing and puffing because I was just like, oh my god, this bitch is so annoying. I cannot stand this character. Oh my god. I mean, I really could not get over how much of just a little shit she was. And, I mean, and there's even a point where it's like, I look at the parent, her mother, and I'm like, wow, her mother's actually kind of trying to not be a bitch. And Merida is just really, just, I don't know, I hate to sound like the old man here, but I felt like this movie paints a really ugly picture to children about how they should act. And I mean, yeah, I get it. At the end, the moral of the story comes out and she learns her lesson. But for the most part, she is still kind of a brat. And I was just like, no, this is not good. And I like the twist that they did with her mother, which I'm not going to spoil because if you haven't seen this, it's actually a really neat twist. But I liked what they did there. But they really left out a key piece that I felt like should have come back up at some point. And that's the woman, the witch, who Merida goes to get the spell to change her fate in the first place. I liked what they did as far as, you know, creating an antagonist for the movie. But, I mean, ultimately, I just felt like everything here was wasted. It was just wasted potential, wasted talent. You had great voice acting. The animation was pretty damn good. But, I mean, ultimately, this was yet another year where I think Pixar just really dropped the ball. It's like last year it was Cars 2. This year it's Brave. And I feel like, man, this might have been one y'all probably should have left in the cooker for a little while. You know, so it could have, you know, maybe developed a little bit more before, you know, the movie was completely, you know, thrown out there for, you know, the general audience to see. But, I mean, ultimately, I mean, like I said, I still enjoy the film. Just, man, it had more than its fair share of problems. Let's move on to my next film. Number 2 is Amazing Spider-Man. Ah, man, Amazing Spider-Man. What was the problem with this movie? Okay, on the whole, I actually enjoyed it. I like the fact that they went with a different villain other than, like, one of his major ones. Even though I did think the Lizard was kind of, handled poorly as far as the CGI aspect of him. I did like the actual portrayal of Kurt Connors, though. But my biggest problem with this movie is it was Peter Parker himself, which is the majority of the movie, and it was really hard to like him. It was like Peter Parker went from being one of those types of kids that didn't really disobey, his aunt, May and Uncle Ben. At least on the whole, he wasn't disrespectful. He was a genuinely good kid. The Peter Parker we have in the movie played by Andrew Garfield is honestly just a little hipster shit. And I really found myself not liking Peter Parker. And that's the essence of Spider-Man. The essence of Spider-Man is that Peter Parker is supposed to be that guy that could be you. He's that guy that you look at and you're like, oh my god, that could be me. I could totally be Peter Parker. And that's the thing, he's the everyman. And in this movie, I felt like, okay, a lot of people wanted to harp on the fact that, oh, he's not a nerd like he was in the comic books, and he's not a geek, and he just was way too cool, and you know what? Fuck that. I don't care about that part. Because times have changed, and yes, Peter Parker was a different type of character, but ultimately, I felt like they really, really made just a very poor choice, and just did a disservice to the character by making him a douchebag. I just felt like that was just the wrong route to go with it. Other than that, and the C. Thomas Howell cameo that made no sense, that was my biggest problem with the movie, and it really stuck out. Let's talk about the next movie on my list, because this one is going to be the one I think a lot of people are going to scratch their head at. My number one meh movie of 2012 is The Dark Knight Rises. Yeah, that one. And I'll tell you why. And when I tell you this, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you'll still think I'm crazy, but for all the good sequences in the movie, my biggest problems line up one right after the other. It seems like the timeline of the movie was kind of off, because I honestly felt like maybe due to the opening of the film, maybe Bane should have broken Batman first, and then he could walk around all decrepit and all, oh, I need a cane, and I'm broken, and all this other shit, and then come back later and beat Bane. My other problem with it is the fact that, I don't know, and maybe this is my fanboy coming out for my love of the Batman comics, but Bruce Wayne wouldn't just so easily give up being Batman. I mean, that's his thing. That's his crusade. And I felt like Christopher Nolan did a huge disservice to the character by making him so eager to give up being Batman, which was something that he was so eager to be in the first two movies. And maybe even played around with the idea of giving it up, but ultimately realized he couldn't give it up. And now it seems like they went back to that same material again, but this time it's like, oh, no, he's going to give it up. My problem even extends to the pacing of the movie. It extends to the fact that I did not buy that Bruce Wayne recovered from having his back broken so easily. The magical knee brace that just instantly made him not a cripple anymore. The fact that I felt like you really could tell they intended for the Joker to be in this movie, because there were some scenes that Bane took on that felt like scenes that the Joker would have done. Which it is true that the Joker was originally intended to be in this movie had Heath Ledger not have passed away. And like I said, Tom Hardy did a good job for the most part. It's just that you could see that hole was felt. Another problem I had with the movie was, and not Joseph Gordon-Levitt's fault, but the twist they make with his character at the end of the movie, I felt that was a little forced. I also felt like, the ending with Bruce Wayne, Batman, was kind of a dick out of nowhere. It just, I don't know, the movie suffered from so many problems. And like I said, during the best of, I talked about how, Avengers had so many problems. But I didn't care about those problems and didn't think about them so much because I was having so much fun while I was watching the movie. Whereas Batman is a different type of comic book movie. It's actually, the Batman movies that Christopher Nolan makes, they're more like they're more like crime, drama, thriller type movies. And you almost have to treat them in a different light. But that being said, there was so little Batman in this movie that I honestly felt like it could have been, you could have called this movie anything else and it probably would have been awesome. And I really felt like this movie did not live up to the expectations that it is set out for. I mean, now, maybe if the movie would have maybe been the second one, maybe this would have been the better film. Because I honestly felt like it had more of a place if it were put directly behind Batman Begins. And if I were to watch this movie again and, like, say, or watch the Nolan trilogy on the whole, I would probably watch them in that order. I would probably watch Batman Begins first, then Dark Knight Rises, and then The Dark Knight. But ultimately, I feel like they shot their wad with the second movie, and the expectations were set way too high as a result, and it was that unrealistic level that they couldn't achieve again. And it's not anybody's fault. It's just the fact that, honestly, you made a good movie, then you made a phenomenal movie, and then you made let me rephrase that. You made a great movie, then a phenomenal movie, and then you made a good movie. And that's kind of how I feel this one went. And like I said, no, once again, it's not that I don't like Dark Knight Rises. It's not even that I hate it. I still think it's a good movie, and I'll probably watch it again. But it's not something that I actually care to own on Blu-ray. Hell, my girlfriend even kind of hinted at the idea of buying the trilogy for me for Christmas. And I was kind of like, no, I'm alright. I mean, I have the Dark Knight, and that's really the only one I care about. And it's a sad thing for me to say because I'm a huge Batman fan. I love Batman. But the thing is, I have my issues with the Nolan trilogy. And it's not to say that he has done a poor job with them. I think he's done a great job, better than anybody who's tried thus far. But I ultimately feel like there's some choices he made as far as this last particular movie where I feel like, they were mistakes. I honestly, I could have thought of better villains to have in this movie. I think you could have achieved about the same level of terror if you would have went with somebody like the Riddler. Actually, I think it probably would have been better to have that kind of a character in there to match wits with the Dark Knight. But that's neither here nor there, and those are musings for another day. They'll come up in another podcast. But, I mean, ultimately, I really do feel like, this movie came out, Avengers was riding high still, and this movie showed up, and it just did not deliver on that same level that Avengers delivered on. Which is, once again, it's not anybody's fault. It's just, it's just the way it went down. And that is that's my worst of 2012 and my movies that were meh in 2012. So stick around. There's part 3 coming up where I'm going to be giving out my individual awards. And just like I said, just stay tuned.